Okay. For today's interview, I'm doing with Mr. Chase Oliver. He was the 2022 senatorial candidate for the state of Georgia. He ran against Herschel Walker, the Republican candidate, and the current incumbent Senator Rudolph Warnock, the Reverend Warnock. He won 2% of the vote, which created a runoff for that election. And he is now currently running for the Libertarian ticket for the 2024 presidential campaign. So, so here's my question to you, Mr. Oliver. Better yet, can you introduce yourself? Because to tell people who you are.
Sure. Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me here. It's always great to speak with folks, and thanks for providing me the opportunity for folks to hear about the campaign. My name is Chase Oliver, as you said. And as you said, I ran for Senate last year, but really looking forward to 2024. I'm a candidate who wants to show energy and activism within the Libertarian Party. Got my start in politics as an anti-war activist, moved on to immigration and justice activism. And now I am seeking the Libertarian Party's nomination for our presidential ticket. The reason being, I think I'm a good messenger of the Libertarian philosophy and brand. And I can do a great job of bringing a lot of new people into the movement, into the party, and really challenge the two-party system in 2024. And thanks for having me.
All right, and you're very welcome. So I think that answer my my second question is, why are you running for president? So I think that's the I think you already answered that question. So let me talk about foreign policy, since you said though you are into the peace movement. What is your own foreign policy? And there are 3 areas of the world currently, or should I say 4? Actually, it's 4, which is very contentious. What would a President Oliver would do when in terms of the Ukrainian-Russian conflict, the possible conflict between China and Taiwan, what goes on the Korean peninsula, and would you back a Palestinian state?
So let's just so let me just break it into the we'll go the mile high view, and then we'll get more into detail about those 4 particular issues. But my foreign policy, if I were elected president, would be one that is looking to reduce our military footprint in every continent around the world, except for, of course, North America, where we are. Right. And I would like to see that because ultimately I would like to forge relationships diplomatically with other nations using market relationships. I think it's better to trade with other people. You don't really want to shoot other people or bomb other people if you're peacefully trading with them and you're creating market prosperity between both nations. And so I think that is really where my focus would be when it comes to foreign policy. Now, right now, probably the largest foreign policy challenge would be Ukraine, right? That is the one that is most in the news right now. Right. And, I sincerely do not believe the United States should be putting a military footprint there by arming any side using taxpayer funds. I do believe, however, we should open up avenues where if private individuals would like to donate to that cause, or heck, if they even want to go over there and fight in Ukraine, I don't believe we should stop people from being able to do that. But I just don't want the government to be able to participate in that. What I would rather the government do in Ukraine is focus on the humanitarian aid that we can provide. Namely, allowing anybody who is in Ukraine right now, who's not serving in the military, who wants to get out of the war zone, to allow them to become refugees using asylum within the United States. Removing those innocent people off of the battlefield, I think, is a great way to save a lot of innocent lives without exacerbating a proxy war. And then the other thing you can do is also offer this same guarantee of asylum to any Russian soldier who does not want to fight on the front line, who wants to abandon the front line and come to this country. We should allow them to go through an asylum process as well, so that way they're not being forced to fight over in there. And I believe when you do that, you're going to reduce a lot of the morale in the Russian military, forcing them back across the border. And you're going to save a lot of Ukrainian lives without having to provide guns or weapons or bombs any further than we already have. Obviously, we've given a lot of stuff to Ukraine. I think ultimately we need to change that path towards a more peaceful and humanitarian kind of focus. The next one you mentioned, I know you mentioned, let's see, the Middle East. You mentioned, China and Taiwan.
Right.
This is part of that market interdependency that I was talking about. Ultimately, I think so long as we're forging those market relationships within China, really, it's a lot of saber rattling on both sides, both from the Chinese state, who want to appear ascendant and strong on the world stage, as well as our military industrial complex, who wants us to keep spending more and more at the Pentagon level, right? So this is really, ultimately, I think it's kind of a game of chicken between the two. I don't anticipate really a war in Taiwan so much as posturing from both the military industrial complex and our government here, as well as the Chinese state. What we need to be doing is really being the adult in the room, willing to meet with the Chinese leaders directly and kind of say, we can work through this out through trade and mutual agreement, as opposed to pointing weapons at each other. And because really any war between us and China would be mutually assured market destruction of both of our economies. We're so interdependent. So I think that's something we can avoid if we are willing to be diplomatic. Speaking of diplomacy, let's move right on to the Korean Peninsula. I believe, one of the few things I'll credit with Donald Trump with is that he actually was willing to meet with the Koreans. That's something that his predecessor, Barack Obama, had promised to do when he was first elected in 2008, was to meet world leaders without preconditions, so that way we can extend the olive branch and try to diffuse tensions around the world. I would be somebody that would continue that process. I would be willing to meet with the Koreans, both North and South, or be a broker between the two, to try to foster peace in the region there and ultimately diffuse tensions. We have to keep doing that. We have to keep being willing to talk to those who we might not necessarily agree with. And that doesn't just extend to Korea, that can extend to Iran and other nations. And then lastly, I do believe there has to be some sort of state solution for the Palestinians. That what the details are, that's going to have to be worked out between the two parties there. But I do believe that there has to be some sort of two-state solution, which has been the United States policy for a long time. And I don't believe, that there's any other way to really foster peace in the region, though this has been an ongoing conflict for a long time. So it's going to take cooler heads to prevail from both the Israeli and Palestinian sides of things for us to really see that come to fruition. And the United States can be a partner in that effort, but they're not going to be able to take the lead. The lead's going to have to come from those who are really on the ground there and are most affected. The best we can do is to say that we are going to take a hands-off approach in terms of being a militaristic force in the region, and instead try to foster that cooperation. I hope I answered all. I think I got all four of them. And all then right. Broadly speaking, the foreign policy there.
Right. I have a follow-up then. Do you believe that the West giving the Ukrainians weapons and any other type of aid, do you think that have worsening or help deteriorate the conditions between the West, Russia, and also the West and its relationship with Russia and Russia's economic and military allies?
Yeah, ultimately, I think what's happened here is, I do believe that we have exacerbated the war, obviously, by adding military hardware on Ukraine's side. I think that if anybody needs to be doing that and providing military aid to Ukraine, it should not be the United States. We don't have a direct threat here. We don't have to worry about Putin attacking us. If anybody should be providing that backup to their neighbor nations, it should be actually Europe taking the lead, and we should be taking a hands-off approach. That way we can be the person in the room that can actually bring the two sides together to try to come together with peace. When we arm one side or the other, when we put a thumb on the scale for one side or the other, militarily speaking in that manner, beyond humanitarian aid and claims for asylum for anybody who doesn't want to fight, which I ultimately believe is the moral path, anything else is just going to create further distance between ourselves and at least one of the parties involved. And if we're going to be somebody who wants to help negotiate peace, we have to be willing to do that. And I think Europe really should be taking the lead there, as they are the nations that are most threatened. I will say this. If Putin's goal was, as originally stated, was to prevent NATO from being on the border of Russia, he's massively failed in his calculation by invading Ukraine. Despite what happened before this invasion happened, it has certainly solidified Europe's resolve, and it has added Sweden to the growing NATO nations, right? And so, right. If anything, this has been a backfire on Putin's part. I think he needs to recognize that and move back across Ukraine's border and end this foolish war. It's killing a lot of people, but we can't do that, and we can't hold that position and be willing to walk in the room with him if we're arming people.
Okay. I'm gonna move on to. Oh, you know what? Let me ask the question I should have asked earlier. Let's speak about your senatorial run in last year in 2022.
Sure.
Against Herschel Walker and Senator Warmack. I hope I pronounced his name right.
Warnock, yes, but yes.
Warnock. I'm sorry. Yeah. How was that feel that your candidacy was the world was watching your candidacy, what happened in Georgia and the craziness or the insanity, how some people saw it between Warnock and Walker and the circus. How did you feel about during that senatorial run?
Yeah. So when I forced the runoff, I felt really honored that I got to disrupt the two-party system in a way that really created real news and mainstream attention to the Libertarian Party. I think that's something that I sought to do in this election. That was the next metric of victory beyond winning the election, right? Is that I wanted to make sure I forced the runoff and was able to make sure that we put our issues forward, namely about how rigged the election system is to begin with ballot access, and the fact that we don't have something like ranked choice voting or some other advanced voting model that takes away a spoiler effect. That way the voters can vote with confidence and jump outside the two-party system more easily. So I was happy to bring those issues to the forefront. I'm going to continue doing that in the presidential race. But yeah, it was a whirlwind. It was, I'd gotten some media before I caused the runoff. But after I did, it was like a cascade. It was like an avalanche of media. And we've been lucky in our campaign that we've continued to try to continue those media relationships. And we've been getting great. As far as like a libertarian primary campaign, we've been getting lots of mainstream attention, even from, say, the Des Moines Register, who's going to have as part of their straw poll at the state fair next month. I'm the first libertarian that's ever been included in that presidential straw poll. So we're continuing to kind of make history and get mainstream attention to the Libertarian Party. And I felt really great to do that. And ultimately, it felt really good to get on a debate stage and to tell a sitting senator that the people don't trust him, that he's not reading the bills, that he's just spending money out of thin air. And I look forward to hopefully making enough of a splash in this next election to where I'll get on the stage again with President Biden. And if President Trump's not in jail by then, he's got a lot of legal trouble going on. But whoever the Republicans end up picking, I look forward to getting on the stage with them and defending the principles of liberty and freedom and really challenging the two-party system.
Okay. Have you one way or the other during the last election? Did you campaign rather kind of sway voters who supported you to pick one candidate over the other? Because I remember on that debate, you said you want to host a debate between the current senator and Herschel Walker. Was that a way? Was that a way for you to have your supporters pick the remaining two candidates?
Yeah, so I didn't want to endorse either candidate. The only idea that I did endorse is that if we had ranked choice voting, we wouldn't have had to wait weeks to know who would have won the runoff. Right, we would have had an instant runoff. Right. But what I offered both candidates was a chance to host a forum. I was going to host a forum with a member of the media, and I wanted to have both candidates sit down and explain why those 81,000 Georgia voters who selected me in the first round should select them. I believe that's an honest way to do it. I wouldn't want to tell somebody how to vote. I believe in letting the voters decide that for themselves. And many of my supporters actually sat home. Also, a lot of voters went to the polls and cast a blank ballot in protest. Now, that doesn't get counted in the runoff, but something like 6,000 voters went to the polls and just cast a blank ballot, saying that they didn't like either of the choices. And so I think we should have. I really wish either candidate had taken the opportunity to really respect those voters and hear them out and give them a case for why they could have come out in the next round. And who knows, if Herschel Walker had done that, he might be the senator from Georgia right now if he had utilized that opportunity. But I can only provide it to him. I can't. You can take the horse to water, but you can't make him drink, so to speak. And so that's kind of where we're at.
Oh yeah, okay. Let me move on to social issues.
Sure.
You hear people like Matt Walsh, Daily Wire, the confirmation hearing of Justice Jackson of what is a woman, and you being part of the LGBTQ community. What is your and also you got the Women's Bill of Rights that was passed in the state of Oklahoma. How would you being part of that community when it comes to the transgender community and their relation with using women's restrooms, being women's sports, and,
Sure.
etc. What would be your opinion on that?
So again, I'll go kind of mile high, and then we'll get to that specific question, right? And like you said, I am a member of the LGBTQ community. I know lots of trans folks out there, and I'm somebody that really, ultimately, at the end of the day, trans healthcare and really all healthcare should be out of the realm of government as much as possible. I believe in letting people make their own individual decisions. I also believe that when it comes to somebody who is younger than the age of 18, I don't believe in surgery. Now, that's pretty straightforward there. People have accused me of saying I support surgery. I do not. For people under 18 for trans healthcare, I think that's kind of a life-altering surgery, and that should wait till you're in the purview of being an adult so that you have the ability as yourself to consent. Other gender-affirming care, though, I think that should be in the purview of a doctor and a parent to be making that decision. Parents make decisions like, say, if their kid, I had to have a sinus surgery when I was younger because I was having trouble breathing due to having a broken nose. Well, my parents had to sign off on that. They were the ones who met with a doctor, consulted, looked at the risks, and determined what the best course of action was. And I believe we should continue to do that for parents, as opposed to trying to take certainly the small infinitesimal number of trans and non-binary young people, take that out of the hands of those parents and put it into a government board of bureaucrats. Like, I just don't like central planning, and I don't like the government having more say than a parent with those regards. Now, specifically to the issue of women's restrooms, I believe that each individual property owner should determine their policy with women's restrooms. And I think that's pretty straightforward. It's not really the government's role, except for in public places. And I think where public spaces exist, there should be ultimately either a gender neutral restroom situation, as I've seen in the Kansas City airport, where there's individual stalls. There is no men or women's restroom. There's just several individual rooms where you can go in and use the restroom and lock the door. I think that's the best course of action for the government to take. But in places where that doesn't exist, ultimately it's going to come down to individual localities who are deciding. That shouldn't really be a federal policy so much as, when it's the local library, the city council make that decision. But when it comes to privately owned places, that's the property owner's jurisdiction. And I think the free market will react. If you're somebody who is not allowing trans folks to use the bathroom in an area with lots of trans people and trans acceptance, the market might react one way, and I think that's just how we should determine these things instead of letting the government determine that policy.
And going back to your first, something you said first. So would you be against puberty blockers be given to children or people under a certain age?
Yeah, so I'm not a medical expert.
Okay.
I'm not going to pretend to be. I believe that doctors really are. And I think it's going to be determined, and I think most medical cases really should be taken on a case-by-case basis. Gender dysphoria is not just a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. So when children are going through it, there should be experts involved along with parents. Now, I can tell you this. I've met lots of parents of trans kids, and not a one of them was like, I hope my kid's trans today. Like, they didn't go into this like going, wow, I hope this happens. they came into this going, okay, my child has come to me with these feelings and this stuff, and I have to go to those who are more trained and have more of an expertise in this thing. And I think when you look at what most pediatric organizations, as well as most psychological organizations, they'll say that that is a particular course of action that some kids should take. But the most common course of action is social transitioning, where you just allow them to change their hairstyle, perhaps, their clothes, the way they present themselves with their pronouns and their name. That's the most common way to provide gender-affirming care, still to this day. And I think that that is the first course of action that gets taken. Anything else beyond that is going to come with a lot of consultation with medical experts. And like any other, medical condition or course of treatment, that's where it should lie, is with those parents and the doctors. Because most parents, I think you and I would agree, nearly all parents out there are some parents out there who are terrible, right? They're bad ones. But for the most part, most parents are just in there for unconditional love for their kids, and they're going to be an advocate for them. And I would say most doctors out there are just trying to provide the best care they know for their patients. Government is so far removed from that I think that there are a lot of cracks you can fall through when you create just top-down policies from the government level.
Okay. On to the Second Amendment. I remember on your debate, you said anybody with a gun will most likely not be oppressed. Mm-hmm. So I'm paraphrasing what you said at the debate last year. So what is there have been calls for red flag laws, trying to do things to certain automatic, semi-automatic weapons. What is your policy when it comes to the Second Amendment and gun rights, mm-hmm. and this debate of what is a well-regulated militia?
So first, I love guns. I'm somebody who absolutely supports them. I did say at the debate, I intersected that with my LGBTQ identity. I said armed gays are harder to oppress and harder to bash, but the truth is all people, when they are armed, are harder to oppress and harder to commit violence against, right? I oppose red flag laws that you mentioned, which, the last president, Donald Trump, said, take the guns first, due process second. And he's not the only Republican that supports them. There's even the Republican governor of Tennessee who kind of caved the pressure after shooting in that state to want to enact red flag laws, which are clearly unconstitutional. I would not support them as president. I also think any semi-automatic weapons ban, a la a quote-unquote assault weapons ban, really flies in the face of the Constitution, which says that all people deserve the right to defend themselves and bear arms. And lastly, I would seek to oppose any kind of like the pistol brace ban or the suppressor bans. These things that are coming out of the federal government need to end. And to that end, I would ultimately want to get rid of the ATF as an organization. I think the federal the organization itself has committed a lot of violence that it hasn't needed to. And really, it's an organization that's basically a lobby for gun control for the federal government. So I would ultimately want to undo that. But barring that, we're going to oppose any kind of new gun restrictions, any kind of new gun bans, and certainly any red flag laws, if I were president, would be vetoed immediately, and it would challenge the Congress to try to override. And I don't think you would get that will from the Congress, because the American people like owning their guns. We're the most gun-friendly nation, in terms of gun ownership in the world for a reason. So I'm somebody who will defend the Second Amendment wholeheartedly. And, you're not going to get anybody defending it any more than I would. I mean, libertarians are pretty straightforward on guns. And it's one of our kind of our pillars of our philosophy is that we have to be a check on tyranny. And that check is a well-armed populace, which could compose a militia. So should the government really turn to tyranny where there is armies marching through the streets, it's the last check against that. So we should instill that virtue and continue to move it forward as we go through as a nation. That's kind of how I feel about guns, and I don't think anybody's ever going to change my mind on them.
Okay, can you expound more on red flag laws?
Yeah,
I think some people are kind of confused. Can you define what that is.
Yeah, so just, nuts and bolts, it's kind of the layman's explanation of it, is that the red flag laws would basically empower government to be able to take away your guns without giving you any kind of trial or due process. If somebody says, hey, I think so-and-so might be dangerous, they've threatened me, so take their guns away, before any kind of protective order or any kind of court has ever seen that stuff. And it really is just kind of this extra constitutional way to disarm people. And ultimately, while people say, hey, it's to protect people who are maybe victims of violence, it also is a way to disarm people who might themselves become victims of violence. You have somebody threaten and say, hey, this person's dangerous, take their guns away. And then you would commit violence against that person, right? So I would rather have, if we're going to be, and sometimes there is a need where people are extremely dangerous, right? If somebody is extremely unwell and committing or threatening major violence, there might be a situation where you might have to have a court case to determine whether they are mentally fit to be able to take care of themselves. And in that case, there is a situation where, a judge might order guns taken away. But without that due process, any of that is extra constitutional. So we should avoid those laws really as much as possible. Again, from Democrats and Republicans now supporting these.
So do you believe that, and by theory, you believe that the red flag laws would have prevented the what happened in the high school in Florida? Was it Parkland?
I don't know, because ultimately I don't know. If it would or wouldn't have. A lot of these times, when people are like, oh, these kids, they got access to guns. Yeah, the guns were legally obtained. The person passed a criminal background check, and there's no gun control that's been offered that would have prevented that stuff. The only gun control that keeps getting offered are things that would either prevent, you don't know if it would prevent something, right? Like if a red flag law, they can argue, hey, this prevented this, but you don't know what violence was actually prevented, right? And then secondly, sorry, I just don't find the case to be very compelling that it's going to reduce violence, like say a semi-automatic weapons ban. There will always be ways to get violence. If you just outlaw semi-automatic rifles, well, semi-automatic rifles are about 3% of all gun violence. The most common gun violence is done with handguns. And if you're outlawing handguns, you're at a point where you're just completely disrespecting the Second Amendment to a level that we have never seen if you try to do it like that. And handgun bans have been struck down by the Supreme Court with precedent when they tried to do it in D.C. And so I think any attempts to, if you're trying to outlaw guns to stop gun violence, that would be the ones to outlaw, but you're never going to get that to pass constitutional muster, nor should it. And so I think any of this talk of semi-automatic weapon bans is just kind of window dressing on the real problem, which is violence in our communities. And that's not going to be solved via legislation. That's solved through human connection and empathy with our neighbors, as opposed to what we have today, where we're so kind of disconnected with each other. We dehumanize each other online. There's a lot of issues around gun violence that don't involve the guns. And I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive sometimes, but we really have to examine that.
Okay. Let me see. Yeah, let me talk about so what's your I noticed that some members of the of your political party, the Libertarians, there's a portion of them that want the the Georgian tax to be in lieu of our current progressive income tax. What ideas do you have for revamping or recreating the tax policy and tax code? What would be your
you're asking a libertarian about taxes, man. This is you're ready for an answer here. So
Right.
I'm what's called a minarchist. I believe in the minimal amount of government just to basically protect our sovereign borders from invasion and to have courts and the system of that to adjudicate disputes between people to protect their liberty. So in the ideal, I would like government to be small enough where it could be funded through voluntary means, where people would just contribute to it so that way their liberty is protected, right?
Right.
But I don't think we're going to get there anytime soon. So we got to work with the world we're in right now. So if I were elected president and I were inaugurated, I would sign any bill that reduces the tax impact on people. But ultimately, I would be looking to replace the income tax with something that we could replace it with, which would be a consumption tax. That's called the fair tax. Once you get to the fair tax is basically just a national sales tax that replaces all other federal taxation, including the entitlement taxes that are come out of your paycheck. So you would get 100% of your paycheck, and you would only be taxed when you spend. You would never be taxed if you save for a rainy day, but you would only be taxed at the point of purchase, at the point of consumption. So the idea being the more you consume, the more you would pay in taxes. And then there's also a built-in prebate to make sure that nobody is taxed up to the point of poverty level. So that way, anybody living at or below the poverty level would pay no tax, essentially, to the federal government. And anybody that does live above that line as it were set would begin to pay into the system. I think that is a system that works a lot better than the income tax system. But ultimately, we would want to go from there till we reduce our government to such a size that we don't even need that, and it's funded through voluntary means.
Okay. Okay, I'm glad. Okay, since you mentioned the probate, how would that work? What are the thresholds?
Yeah. So let's just use round numbers, right?
Okay.
So let's say the tax rate of the fair tax is 30%, right? And let's say poverty level is we'll use $30,000 as well, right? So the poverty level for an individual is $30,000 a year, and the income tax or the fair tax rate is 30%. If you're at poverty level, really every American is going to get a check every month that is going to cover 30% of $30,000 a year. You're going to get it monthly. So it'll be broken up into 12 installments. And so if you make below that, there's no possible way, based on your income, you could spend and get taxed beyond that level. But if you make a little bit more, you're going to get a lower tax impact, and it basically allows the fair tax to be progressive in a way that the poorest among us are not having to pay into the system. We only pay in once you're above what we would create as an arbitrary line to create poverty level spending, right? You do have to draw that line somewhere, index it correctly, and go from there. And I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing. That the plan's been around for a long time. And I think there's all the kinks can get worked out, but namely, every person in this country would be getting a check every month to cover their base needs and the taxation on their basic needs. And with that, you would be reducing the burden on a lot of people and negating any tax burden on millions of Americans who unfortunately still live below the poverty line.
Okay. And my next question is about the southern border. I live in the border state, and I have seen some things in South Texas myself. What do you believe? What's really starting or creating massive legal migration into the United States? How would you stop it if you were president? And what remedies would you give to the citizens that are harmed on this side of the border? I'll stop there because I got enough follow-up questions. Go ahead.
Because it's always a big issue, right? So First, you say what's causing the people to come here? What's causing people to come here is instability where they're from. Both market instability as well as real violence that goes on south of our border. Much of that is caused by our war on drugs, by the fact that we have created a marketplace for the illegality and black market of drugs in this country. And because of that, there is a lot of money south of the border that is to be made smuggling drugs into this country. And with that money comes a lot of violence that's attached to it, where you have completely controlled cartel areas, and people wanting to escape that. And I don't think we can blame people for wanting to escape that. I think if I lived in that condition, I might want to pack up and run too. And so then we have to think about what can we do to reduce the impact of illegal immigration? Well, the way we can do that is to streamline the means for people with documentation legally to work. And that way we can also crack down on those who would be being illegally trafficked for forced labor or sex. If we're allowing those who just want to come here and work and do their thing and work, to be able to do that more easily, say with an Ellis Island style of immigration, where you just come in to a port of entry, you give your name, you check that against a major background check to make sure you're not wanted for murder somewhere or something to that effect. And then make sure you're not carrying any communicable diseases, so you're not harming the population as you come in with that possibility. I think that's the best way to get workers to come in here, because we do need the labor. Ask any farmer, they're going to say we do need that labor, right? And there's a lot of other industries beyond the agricultural sector, and so that's a great way to get these workers here, to allow them to be here with documentation, and also to focus our law enforcement eye instead on the traffickers who are causing legitimate harm. The thing I tell people all the time is right now we have like a shadow economy of millions and millions of immigrants who are here without documentation. And I always think to myself, how many immigrant wives and children are being abused currently at home who cannot call for help? They cannot go to the police. They can't go to an authority figure for help for fear of deportation. And so those are the real human rights costs. And in addition to the kids in cages and the people being detained, these are the real human rights costs of a broken immigration policy that we could simplify, that allows people to come here to work and allows us to really focus on the real crimes with real victims. I think that would create for a safer country as well, because the immigrant community would be able to more, go to the police and be able to report these things. You would see safer communities all around if we got rid of the shadow economy that we have today. As for those who are harmed by immigrants who come here, they should seek the same legal restitution if someone were here as a citizen. I don't find that to be controversial, but I think for the most part, nearly everyone who wants to come here from south of our border wants to come here and just work and put down roots, like my forefathers did coming here from Europe. And so I think we need to not take people's opportunity away to do that. I think there's plenty of room here, plenty of jobs that need working, and we can be, eventually allow these people to have a pathway, in line. Let the people who are already here first get in line first, but an eventual pathway to citizenship, so that people can really put down roots and contribute to this country. I think that's a way to have prosperity. And frankly, we're going to need the workers, as so many older workers retire, to really replace that labor that we're gonna be missing.
Okay. Because my follow-up question was going to be about the drug war. You kind of partially answered my question. So about the drug war is the genesis of some of the plight that some people have on the southern border. How would you end the drug war? Would all drugs be be made legal or decriminalized? What direction would you go?
I'll give you a great real world example of what a no drug war nation looks like. And that's the country of Portugal. It's the little country that's right there next to Spain and Europe, right there on the coast. It's beautiful, by the way. They have great wine from Portugal. But they had a major IV drug use problem in the 1990s. They had a huge heroin epidemic. They were the highest rate of heroin users in all of Europe. And because of this, they had a major hepatitis and HIV scare, because when you share needles, you obviously share bloodborne illnesses like hepatitis and HIV. And so they had two options. They just debated whether they wanted to do a crackdown drug war model where they punish people, throw them in jail, really punitive, go after the dealers, do what we're doing in this country, or the path they eventually adopted was actually decriminalizing all drugs, allowing people to have access to clean needles, allowing people to be able to take their drugs to a chemist to be tested so they know the purity to prevent overdoses, and creating pathways to addiction therapy as opposed to prison for drug users. So if they want to become clean, they can seek that care as opposed to being thrown in a jail cell. And what you saw is actually drug use went down over time. But you also saw that the HIV rates and hepatitis rates plummeted, and it created better public health outcomes. I think that's the model we really need to look to. And with, let's say, take the fentanyl crisis, right? So many people are overdosing because of fentanyl. Well, imagine if you were able as a user, which I don't think you are, and I'm certainly not, but if somebody was a user of opiates, they would be able to take their product to a chemist, pharmacy, and ask them to test the purity and to make sure that there's not fentanyl in that. And that would prevent many overdoses. There's also direct aid and harm reduction strategies. Organizations all over the country do that stuff. There's a great one in Oklahoma. You mentioned Oklahoma earlier, called Shred the Stigma Oklahoma. By passing out Narcan and other things, clean needles, fentanyl testing strips, they prevented over 600 overdoses in a year. That's 2 lives a day pretty much saved, just by doing direct action and helping out those people, treating with a little more empathy than with the law enforcement boot. And so I think that's just got to be the better policy for us to take over time, because we've seen those results work in the real world. And we've also seen that what we've been doing for the last 50 years since Richard Nixon is just not working.
Okay. Well, thank you for answering the question about the drug war. The next question I was going to ask you is, there is a growing number within the African American community, maybe so just online, but I noticed there is this push for repayment for what happened to people during Jim Crow or what happened during slavery. Would you? I noticed that there was some talk about it in the Democratic primary against the current your current senator. His primary challenger was for repayment of slavery,
for reparations.
Yes. How would you go about that? Because there is a growing movement. And I'm actually African American, by the way, and I'll just ask you this question.
Sure.
I'm somewhat on the fence about that. So, how would a President Chase would engage in that sensitive topic?
Yeah, so first, I think we need to look at the issue. Like you said, it's a very sensitive topic. I'm someone who lives in the former Jim Crow South. And so, I recently was speaking at a church in rural Alabama, and I got to talk to them about the topic of freedom. And I said, as a libertarian, I'm very, very, I look to inspiration from the freedom fighters in the Jim Crow South who organized, right? But as far as reparations, I think it's hard to just say, we'll just give cash payments out. That'll solve the issue. I don't think that's what's going to create generational wealth, which is really what is missing, because it's what's been robbed the African American community in this country because of enslavement and then through segregation. And so I actually like there's a plan from a former candidate for governor in New York from a libertarian named Larry Sharp. He's a black libertarian.
Right.
And, he created a really good reparations plan that doesn't cost the taxpayer anything, but what it does is actually reduces the tax burden on individuals and businesses that are majority owned by African descendants of slaves. The reason why you do this is because when you create that market incentive, it encourages other businesses to actually invest and partner within the African American community and invest that capital so that businesses can grow and flourish, and the community can create that generational wealth that you can start to pass on to the next generation, which is what we see with a lot, which is why we see, other races have had the capability to do, because they haven't been stuck under enslavement or under legally mandated bigotry that we saw with Jim Crow. And so I think that I would look at, and I think that's a plan that I would really like to present. If we're going to be talking about reparations in Congress and I'm the president, that would be the starting point that I would look to reach to and see if we can get a majority consensus around something like that, as opposed to what you see from Democrats, which is just, let's give cash payments to, anybody for this amount of time. I just don't think that that's the best way to go about it. It also is just far easier to create real market investment when you give incentive for folks to invest in black businesses, right? Like if they said, hey, you can invest in business A that's white owned, and you're going to get no tax break, or during this reparations period, which would be a generation, it'd be about 21 years, you can invest in this business that's majority black owned, and you're going to get a really great tax rate out of it. Well, I'd say, I know where I'm going to put my white money. I'm going to put it into a business that's going to provide me the best bang for my buck, and that's going to grow. And that would be investing in black businesses. So I think that is a great way to really also break down racial barriers in the marketplace and encourage real investment in a way that will create prosperity for those who have historically been plighted both by slavery and by Jim Crow and segregation. I credit Larry Sharp all the time for a very libertarian reparations plan that we can be, proud of as a party to put forward.
Okay. So is Larry Sharp running? I noticed he was running for governor the last election, I think last year. Is he
I don't know his exact plans. I know he's run for governor, and he's also actually run for vice president in 2020. He was one of our primary VP candidates. But he's always staying busy, and of course he's got his own podcasts and stuff out there. But I recommend folks check him out. I don't know what he's going to run for, if he'll run for stuff in the future, but he's always a good guy to listen to, especially for some great ideas that maybe haven't been heard from the traditional political mainstream before. Something like his reparations plan.
Okay. You're probably the only currently you're the front runner for as far as I'm looking at it. I have interviewed Joshua Rodriguez late last year. The candidate out of Colorado. I think it's Colorado. I think somewhere in the mountain states. Is there any debates planned for in the near future, or y'all just?
Oh yeah, there's going to definitely be. And first, I want to say thank you for calling me the front runner. I don't like to put that mantle on myself, but I will accept it if you want to call it to me. I'm not going to correct you, right?
Right.
But what I'll say is we will be doing plenty of debates and forums. I just got back from one actually. This past week in Ohio, we had a region meeting of 4 states within the Libertarian Party. They all came together in Ohio, and myself and Mike Tremont, who's another candidate, we had a forum. And then as convention season heats up, so one thing your listeners might not know, we select our candidate at convention. We don't have a primary system the way the Republicans or Democrats do. And so each of our state parties are going to meet and select their delegation to send to our national convention in May of 2024. And so a lot of these state conventions are going to have debates. They're going to ask candidates to appear if they can, to participate in these debates. And hopefully it will give their delegate body an idea of who they want to support when they get to our national convention. So I look forward to that process. I got to say, for the most part, nearly every interaction I've had with a candidate who's in our field has been wonderful. We're pretty respectful of each other. We understand that we really get along and agree on nearly most every issue, right? As libertarians, just a matter of degrees, or it's not so much substance, but maybe style that makes us different. But I enjoy meeting and greeting with a lot of them all over the country as I travel. First off, it makes it less boring, right? When you can see people that you see every weekend and be friendly with. And it's just more fun to run for president when you're being friendly with folks, as opposed to having to be mean to each other. Nobody wants to be mean to each other. So it's been a very respectful field so far. And you can call me the front runner if you want, but I'm just going to say I'm happy to be part of it. And I think, you're going to see plenty of robust debate amongst all of us candidates, and I welcome it.
Okay. Yeah. And 2 things. Do you expect Spike Cohen or Congressman Amaj joining in? Because I don't think I think some people list them down as possible candidates. Do you see them joining into the race?
Well, there's always that speculation, right? And what I can say is, I think, I can't speak for either man, right? But I can say that I know Spike's doing great work right now on the ground being an activist. And I don't know if he'd want to run again and do all this stuff all over again if it means he would have to give up the work that he's already doing that's very, very effective around the country. And I got to give him props for that. He stayed active after the nomination, after the election. And so I want to say that's a great thing. So, I don't know if he wouldn't want to give up all the work he's doing. If he does, I welcome him to the field. May the best man win. Again, iron sharpens iron, and I really highly respect him. He's actually recorded podcasts in my house, and I'm very friendly with him, and his wife Tash is amazing too. So, if he jumps in, he jumps in. And I would say the same thing about Congressman Amash. He's someone I respect a great deal. I think we'd bring a lot to our primary process, like kind of our pre-nomination process. And if he jumps in, I welcome that debate with him. And may the best man win. What I will say to folks out there who might be waiting for one of these guys to jump in, don't wait to get involved in the process now. If there's another candidate, maybe me, or any of the other candidates who's like your second choice, go ahead and get involved in their team now. Get your feet out from under you, so that way you have those reps. So if one or the other does jump in later, you can say, hey, I've been working on canvassing all over the country for team X, Y, and Z, but you're here, you're really my first choice, and I want to work with you. I won't fault that against you. If you want to come on my team and say, hey, if Justin Amash jumps in, I'm going to jump on his team. Well, I don't think he's going to jump in, but if he does, okay. And same with Spike. If you're somebody who's like, hey, I like your activism, but I also like Spike's activism, I'm waiting for him to jump in. Well, jump in on my team. Jump on an active campaign right now. And then if Spike gets in and you want to jump on his team later, I can't hate you. We're both nice guys, and that's just your preference. But go ahead and get involved in a Libertarian campaign right now so you can start having an impact. And if one of us becomes the nominee and those people don't jump in, we're already ready to go as strong as possible.
Okay. Is there anybody, because there is a VP, a primary as well, is there anybody that you would like to see as your running mate who's currently running, or somebody out there you'd like to see?
Yeah, well, I'll keep my options open for right now. But what I can say is, of the guys that have been traveling around the country and seeing, namely, there's I would say the four of us that are really the most active campaigners. Myself, Mike Termott, Lars Mapstead, or Jacob Hornberger. Of those remaining three, I could see any of them being my VP, and I'm sure they would work with me. And I think that that goes to that level of respect we each have for each other. But I'm going to keep my options open for now, and who knows? Maybe The Rock wants to run for vice president, right? We'll get him on board. But in the meantime, I just want to keep my options open. But
right.
I'm happy to say that I respect the other people that are really in the field campaigning around the country, and I would be honored to consider them when I become the nominee to make their case.
And okay, and one more question. I didn't have it on my list. How would you or your campaign or even your administration, how would you unite this country? It's been tearing at the seams since the 1990s, since election 2000, obviously, and during the Trump years. How would you unite this country? What way? How would you go about in doing that?
Well, I think it's going to come down to the type of person I am. I'm somebody who is always willing to hear from other people. I'm also somebody who has a great deal of empathy, and I think it's going to require a messenger and a communicator in the White House who is really going to be committed to bringing all sides to the table, to have common grace. That's a term I use all the time, common grace with each other, where you say, hey, I understand we're not going to agree on everything all the time. We're not going to 100% be in agreement. But what we can do right here, right now, is come to the table and try to, and try to see where we do agree. And I think if we have somebody who's willing to be the adult, willing to have common grace with people across the political spectrum in the White House, we can break down some of this really polarized hyper-partisanship we're seeing, where it's just like, well, if you don't like these people, you're a racist, you're a Nazi, you're just terrible, you're horrible, every word under the sun. We have to get back to a position where we're common respect and professionalism with each other. Otherwise, we are doomed to just keep repeating the same mistakes we always have. And I'm committed to not making those same mistakes, to be a next generation of leadership that provides more professionalism and, again, allows for more common grace with one another. That's just the way I would govern. And I hope through that example, others would take that lead and maybe follow suit.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I need to ask. But thank you, Mr. Oliver, for accepting my invite. Because I was trying to get you last year, and I guess it got lost in your I think one of your campaign press secretary just reached me a few weeks ago. Yeah, I was surprised when she sent the email and all that. So yeah.
Yeah, 2022 was nuts, and I apologize if things got lost in the shuffle. We had a much smaller campaign operation at the Senate level,
right?
And so I'm glad we could get you this time around, and thanks for the opportunity. I do want to let your listeners know, if they want to hear a little bit more about me, find me at votechaseoliver.com, or you can follow me on social media at Chase for Liberty. But thank you so much for the opportunity, and I wish you peace, love, and liberty, man.
All right, and when and where is the Libertarian convention?
The Libertarian National Convention will be taking place in Washington, D.C. over Memorial Day weekend. And then, of course, state conventions will start in the fall this year. So if you're in a state, get with your state Libertarian Party and keep on the lookout for that. You'll probably see myself likely traveling all over the country to say hello to you. If you do see me, say hello. But Memorial Day weekend in Washington, D.C., the belly of the beast, is where we'll be having our national convention. And so let's stick it to the two parties out there, have a great time, and elect some great Libertarian candidates to be our nominee. And I hope I'm the presidential nominee there.
Okay. All right, sir. I appreciate it for you coming by, and I wish you on your best luck, and tomorrow, this coming year gonna be a messy year for this country. So thank you for coming by, sir. So I appreciate it.